Hello everybody. Welcome to the UU Virtual Roundtable. My name is Sarah Reyes and I will be today's moderator. So here's a couple of things to consider before we begin. First of all, please keep yourself muted during the presentation, just so that we can get through the presentation very quickly, and we will have a Q&A section afterwards. And number two is we are uploading these sessions onto our YouTube page, which is the Unitarian Universalist Church of Las Cruces. You can find the uploads on our Facebook page as well, and Sherry will also send out an email if you're subscribed to that. And today we'll have Susan Helbach, and she'll be talking about ALR as well as some of her trips. So go ahead, Susan.
You're going to record this too, right, Sarah?
Yeah, it's recording.
Okay.
Okay. Well, the ALR is what I started with. I was not able to transfer the wonderful slideshow that ALR had, so I took some of them, and they're not terrific. But so I'm going to start with ALR. I've got about, I think, 10 slides or so, and then we're traveling to Angkor Wat in Cambodia, and going through some of the Angkor Wat and some of the other temples that are there. It was one of the most fascinating trips I've ever taken, and I was alone. So it was just kind of a strange thing. When you mentioned about safety, I never felt any fear for my physical safety at all. So I'm going to do Angkor Wat, and then after I do Angkor Wat, I'm going to do a slideshow on modern day Siem Reap, Cambodia. So it's going, and they can go fairly quickly, but at least you get an impression of the past and also what's happening there now. The people were extremely good. But let's start with ALR. Are any of you members of ALR or attended?
Oh, yeah, I have.
Yeah.
And others, I'm sure.
I'm past.
Okay, yeah, for sure, Carol.
Yeah.
Yes, well, the history of ALR, as this is telling you, it started in 1992, and they have had over 1,000 seminars or presentations during that time, which is really huge. The founders, and I don't know these people: Virginia Higbee, Gerald Thomas, Tom Gale, Clarence Fielder, Laurie Davis, and there were other people who were involved with it. But I love the purpose. It's to link the community, university and community town to gown, using the expertise of the people that we have at universities. So, or even other experts in the field. They don't have to, I don't think they necessarily have to be a university professor. But the information is really concise, to the point, delivered in a very easy to understand format. And that's why I'm so glad they're taping them now, because some of those topics are so interesting that it was almost sad I couldn't take all that information at once. My hardware, software, whatever it was, just couldn't absorb it all. But there are no tests, nothing else going on. This is just for self-learning. It's enjoyable learning. Let's see how this goes. The structure. This is very important because I think people don't always understand. ALR is part of DAC, and NMSU have really, really helped us set these programs up for Zoom now. Without them, I don't think it would have happened. We get no money from them. It all comes from the people who attend, and sometimes people donate. But everything is volunteer. All the board members, everything that's going on, it's all within the organization. This is how it was in the past when we were meeting at Good Sam's. We had 4 90-minute presentations each month from September through May, the academic year. And the days that the presentations were the professors were presenting depended on their schedule. So it was not always predictable. Different times of the month, sometimes the beginning, sometimes the end, but it all depended on when they had available time. But Good Sam's is an excellent place to have it. The auditorium there is just phenomenal. Doors opened at 10. And this is what people are missing, the camaraderie, meeting people, free coffee, tea, cookies. It was just in the camaraderie, I think is even more important for us than the tea and the cookies. The presentations began at 10:30. We would get together they opened it up at 10 so people could go into the auditorium, do whatever they wanted. Ended at noon, and there would be a slight break usually in between. Speakers, they could have one who did all 4 sessions, or they could have 4 different presenters during the month. This is what's changed, the pandemic. So now we're doing Zoom meetings. They are 50 to 60 minutes, and there usually is not a break. We have a questions and answer. There's where you can register through DAC, because they're taking care of everything for us. They've been phenomenal. But they even give information how to sign on to Zoom, things like that. Membership has changed because we're not in a facility right now. So they've got basic information about it. But the best, and what I did, was admission $50 for the entire fall semester. That's 16 sessions. And for us, I just decided if I wanted to watch or not, I didn't have to go through all the individual lessons. And just like you did today, they're going to email you the Zoom link just before the meeting. ALR past presentations, history of New Mexico, Walt Whitman's poetry, and one of my favorite, which I never thought I would like, Aging Skin, the Barnacles of Life. I thought that particular one, how can you have 4 presentations on aging skin? I could have listened to Jim present for another 4 because he was just phenomenal. He had a great sense of humor, and he presented his information in such a way that it was just wonderful. It was just so enlightening. Hollywood Falls in Love, Debts, Deficits, U.S. Economy, Women in Jazz, American Politics, Modern Physics, Hamilton. That one was so well attended that they were turning people away. Genetics and Medicine, World Dance. So they have music and live performances many times going on, as well as just presentations by professors that come in and use slideshow presentations, or some don't even do that. Water scarcity, chocolate and beer, which that would be a nice one for them to hand out, chocolate and beer, so you could try it. National Park Service, Southern New Mexico's connection with space and more, modern Africa, history of the US West. And one of them they're potentially planning for February is going to be on Southeast Asia, which is what I'm talking about today. And I wish that would have happened before I went on that trip. Programs this fall, September already was the evolution of US military planning. I did learn things. I'm not crazy about some of them, but it was really interesting to listen to them. October's meetings are coming up Tuesdays and then Mondays, which is kind of a strange type of but that's how it worked out with the professor. Politics and implications of the 2020 elections. So that should be interesting. Programs this fall, November is Latin America. There will be music, and I think there are 4 different presenters for that particular program. December, geological history of the Rio Grande Rift in southern New Mexico. And that one's a little easier days, although it starts the end of November. And this was the one when I was mentioning about January and February. I think both of those will be very interesting, just because, like it was mentioned, the world has become so integrated, and so it's really good for us to realize what's happening in some of these places, and especially if we were fortunate enough to travel there. And this is the contact information, and this is what I was telling Sarah, maybe she could put into your newsletter or something, so if people did decide that they wanted to find out more information, they could look at this and they could figure out how to do it. Does anyone have any questions? It's pretty straightforward.
So we went to NMSU ALR, we can get all that information.
You got it. That's true. Exactly. That's you can pull it all up, and there's also a phone number, so that if you had something that was specific, that would be good too. That you could contact them. But if you don't have any other questions, I'm going to get on to my interesting part of this, which is what I really like. Let's see if I can do this. This is Angkor Wat, and I'm going to have to play with the screen a little bit. And I don't have much written on these slides, but on this particular one I did. Are you able to see the slide? Yeah. There's this strange person with a hat standing there, but Angkor Wat is just an incredible site. The Angkor Wat site itself has been almost in continuous use ever since it was constructed. It's the only temple that's been like that. So Buddhists came in there after the Hindus left, and it was an ongoing, it's been inhabited on an ongoing basis, depending. Sometimes wars like Khmer Rouge, when they came in, there were situations that affected what was happening there. But Angkor Wat is a temple city, and that's why it's this huge temple. It was originally a Hindu temple built to be a mausoleum for the king. He was never buried there. The king died in the skirmish in Vietnam, and his body did not come back. But it was originally meant to be a mausoleum. And gradually it was transformed into a Buddhist temple. When I was there, this was already at the beginning of the COVID scare. And so what they explained was that we were lucky because we did not have a whole lot of competition. It was still busy, but nothing like it would have been in normal times, because February is one of the really good times of the year to visit there. It's not the rainy season. It's still hot, but it's not so sticky humid. So it's usually really busy there. Tuk-tuks, motorcycles, those are everywhere. That's the type of transportation they have. This is the moat around Angkor Wat. The moat is almost 3.5 miles long and 650 feet wide. So it's huge. It's a massive moat, and it was kind of, I don't have any aerial views of Angkor Wat, but you would see the Angkor Wat itself is massive, and this moat was built around it. The way people did get across, there was a sandstone bridge. When I was there, they were repairing the bridge, so they had a temporary bridge off on the side, and we could see it. Let's see this one. Here's one that's, I'll do that just because it's got information on there. This was when I was walking across the bridge. Angkor Wat was the political center of the Khmer Empire for over 500 years, which is just amazing that it lasted that long, but it did. And it was the center of everything that was going on in that for the Khmer at that time. Let me see if I can keep track of all these. This is Angkor Wat, covers an area of almost 500 acres, 494 acres. So it's just covers a huge land mass also. The temple is 213 feet high, and that's kind of in the center point, and it's got 3 concentric levels. The third level has 5 towers, and each one has a meaning. Everything is lined up with certain points of the planet, and north, east, south, west. It's just really a huge place. People were walking across. And it's dark. This is kind of interesting to me. This you'll see in my modern Siem Reap photos. According to the inscriptions, the construction of Angkor Wat involved 300,000 workers and 6,000 elephants. The construction occurred over a period of about 30 years. It was never fully completed. But these, I think you can see where my pointer's going. These are called Nagas, and they're still part of Khmer culture. And you see them in other countries too, but they still are part of the Khmer culture. This is a library. This was an old library, or so they said. That's what they thought. There were more than one libraries in that particular facility. The sandstone blocks came down. There's another river too. Sonley, I'm not thinking of it, Sonley Rap. It's another river, but then they came down the Siem Reap River. It took them, the transportation was about 30 miles to get these huge, massive stones there, sandstone, and they brought them down. There's nothing around this area that would have allowed them to do that because it's all sand. This is a view from the library doorway. I must have had the camera elongated, so it ended up that way. Let me pull this. No, I can't pull that down. It was a beautiful sight. There was water all over here. There was a walkway, but we were told that there was water between the library and Angkor Wat structure itself. Now we're into the Angkor Wat. The stone floors were laid without mortar, and they had very tight joints. They were just massive, huge pieces, and it's like almost like you're walking on marble. I never felt uncomfortable or felt like I needed to watch where I walked. These are inscriptions that go right around the entire. Let me do this. For some reason, I learned a lot, but I don't know how much. The gallery walls, all the way around the inner courtyard, there are gallery walls. They have almost 1,000 square meters or 10,764 square feet of bas relief, which is all of this. And it's just absolutely amazing what they did. That's why they would have needed all those people. These are some of the bas reliefs. Wow. They're all about mythology, Hindu mythology most of the time. When I came there, I noticed that almost right away. These headdresses did not look Buddhist to me, but I wasn't, I didn't know enough, I guess, to realize it, but it was. These bas reliefs are incredible. And if you look at some of the necklaces or the headdresses, the work that went into all of these little sashes or whatever, it is just phenomenal. Didn't know where to look after a while. There is a story behind this whole thing. A lot of it has to do with this particular one, wars. What was fascinating to me, men were usually with arrows and fighting wars. Women, not so much. They looked bare-breasted, but that's the way it was. That was their culture, the way they lived. These walls were just absolutely fantastic. I couldn't believe it. It was. They were covered top to bottom with inscriptions corner to corner and around. This was only one part of the room, but it was just fantastic. I don't know if that room was for something special. I'm not sure. This I really liked because this particular spot not only showed depth here, there was water in some of these pond areas, but it showed that there's still color on some of those beans, and they must have been magnificent back in their day. They had to have been just beautiful. This was just a random picture, a random doorway, and I looked up and I thought, oh my God, that's every little detail. You can see all through here, everything is carved, just carved and gorgeous. This was one of the stairways going up to the top. My husband asked me if I knew any of those people. It was just me. But there were groups of people who were traveling like that. It looked like a group of students just out on a trip. This was in Angkor Wat. There are 2 rows of walls, an inner wall and an outer wall. This outer wall had walkways like this all the way around. So you would have walked through, and I can't quite pull it up, but right on these, the carvings, even on the bottom of these poles have carvings everywhere. This is the outer gallery. It's just a magnificent structure, and all the dark on there, I'm sure, is just from acid rain. And you know, we get gray hair, old buildings get dark. That's it. Yeah. And this was another one of the outer wall. They do have really strange type structures up here in their windows, and I'm not sure what that is. I noticed that in many places, if it was just for safety. And down here, this is almost a vertical walk up the side. So how they got up there, I'm not sure, but it must have been really challenging to go up those steps. There were no guardrails. There wasn't wood on there unless they had it before. Now this is going up to that very center conical piece that showed in one of the first slides. This usually takes forever to get up here because there are so many tourists. We were very lucky. I went up almost immediately. This one's going up and this one's coming down. And if you look at this person here, they're going the wrong direction because it's quite frightening. I have a picture just in a little bit coming down, and it is daunting. It really is. But there were people who went up. Before, from what I was told, ordinary people could not go up here. This was just for the priests or the elite, the kings, whatever, but ordinary people were not allowed to go up here. You can still see the steps that they had before. This is definitely a safety issue, or that we wouldn't be going either. This was the view from up there. Extraordinary. But now I was telling you about the 2 rows of walls that they have built. And in the middle are courtyards where they can walk. But I don't know if that was a safety issue or they just had a lot of people staying there. There were places that we didn't walk into, and maybe for safety issues too. This was up on the top, and this stuff was beautifully done, but nobody came up here because just certain people could come up. They call these divatas, and those were all over. They were really everywhere. This was up on the top level where people didn't usually go. And this would have been water in here, in this area. Doorways everywhere, and everything was just exquisite, just sculpted, and a lot of lotus flowers. I think that's still pretty prevalent in Southeast Asia, especially, but it's just quite impressive, really. This is looking from the top now toward the entry and across. There is that library building I was telling you about before.
Oh, yeah.
And this would have been water. Because it's dry season, winter, dry season, everything is brown and dirt. During the rainy season, I've seen pictures of it, everything is green, just lush and beautiful. This was coming down. And that's pretty much what it looked like. So when people walked backwards, I could understand it. It was daunting. This was pretty, this type of roof, it was dominant all over, just depending on the type of material they were using. This is really dark, but that type of structure, that building style was really quite, it was dominant through all of the temples. This was when I came down and I was just walking around, and I have a few pictures of the devatas or whatever that particular word is, but these guys were just sitting there and I was wishing they would go away so I could but actually I like them there because it shows scale. And so they were looking back at one of the pictures I have in just a little bit, taking a picture of it. Incredible. Just incredible work. These were some more, and that was in that corner where the guys were sitting. My guess is that they've cleaned these. I think they might have all been dark. Where we were sitting was kitty corner from that whole corner was kitty corner from this particular view. I really like this lady's skirt. I just thought that was kind of cool. You know, I couldn't have, yeah, that was just really cool. But this is where we were when I took those other pictures right up at the top. And this, I left the information because I knew I couldn't remember it all. This is Vishnu, and because it was a Hindu temple, a lot of those statues are gone now. This one was kept. It's over 10 feet tall, and it was hewn from a single block of sandstone. But there are carvings all around it, and there's just a lot of Hindu culture still left. That was my last view of Angkor Wat, and I thought, what a view. And I don't know, maybe I walked the wrong direction. I was there for hours, and still, I'm sure I didn't see it all. They've decorated him and done him up. He almost looked like a Buddhist monk to me.
Mhm.
This was after, this is pretty typical. After we left that particular temple, I had a tuk-tuk driver. I had a young man named Lucky, and I'm sure his name wasn't Lucky. It was something like whatever it was. But tuk-tuks were the main mode of transportation. They did have modern buses. They had, as you can see back here, there are some private taxis, but the interesting way to do it was to go in a tuk-tuk, and I'm glad I did it that way, but some of the dirt there, or I'll show you that too later in modern day, it was different. Now these guys are wearing masks. The guy that was my driver was not, but because you're driving in the countryside, there's a lot of smoke, open fires, and you'll see that in the modern Siem Reap, but they don't have modern ovens. And so there's a lot of smoke in the air. And so I think that's why this was my favorite temple by far. It's Banteay Srai, and it is also known as the Women's Temple. It's a smaller temple, and it's about 20 miles or so away from any of the other major temples. So we had to go a long distance to go here. I had heard about it, and I would not have gone to Cambodia without going to see it. It's a pink sandstone, I think, or something it was called. So that's why the color is different. This was some of the detail work just on the entryway.
Is that the same age?
Yes, they're pretty close to the same age. This one might even be just a little before. I have this was built in 967 AD is when they were doing it. So I guess it was a little after. Yeah, this one was, and I'm not sure exactly, it was called rose pink sandstone. And this one was not built by a king, because there were kings that were usually putting up these temples. And that's why I think they think it's maybe a woman's temple. But it's also the lighter color, and there are a lot of the fine work is more floral in design than some of the others. This was just one of the sections of it. It's just didn't even know where to look sometimes because it was just beautiful.
They never had queens.
Do you know, I don't know that. I think it was more, they wrote about the kings, and that's where I read like this king, and I can't say his name. It begins with an S. It was more about that whole lineage, and they talked about them, but I didn't read anything about women being in power or women being like queens. It is also interesting, those bas reliefs, that so many of the women were topless. They didn't wear any shirts or anything like that. And the men, again, were warriors, warrior kings. But this is just one of the temples there.
Was the temple abandoned at some time? It looks like, I don't know if these trees are growing out of the temple, but that would have been a structural risk for the building.
That happens in a lot of them. And you'll see that in the last one. I've got a slide of Tomb Raiders, I think it was, that they filmed there. Indiana Jones type thing. And if you've ever seen that film with Indiana Jones, and the trees are growing out, but you'll see that one and a further one. A lot of these were not only structurally damaged because of these, I think they call them fig trees. They can grow to like 200 feet or something. They're just massive trees. They damaged the temples, some earthquakes. They've had earthquakes in that area that have damaged them. So a lot of the damage, and just it's the jungle taking over. And like, you know, in your own home, you don't take care of it, it starts to deteriorate. And so there wasn't any tuck pointing going on, nothing else. And I don't think they had cement. See that, yeah, how they did this stuff, I'm not sure. Now this is modern day going on. Here's an old part of the temple. And here they're redoing this entire temple. These guys were just working on it, and you can see all the new work. They must have been really, really good artisans, because they were quite likely had to fill in places where stone had fallen off. And this was maybe the one place where I did notice that a lot of work was going on. This was interesting. Go ahead.
I'm just going to ask, so originally they were built about 500 to 1000 AD, like that?
They started around 800.
Oh, 800.
And they were, and you know, you're right, because the building itself quite likely went on during that time frame, that early time frame, because these temples are really old, but they started around 800 AD. And so they were occupied until almost mid 1400s.
Oh.
And then after that they left, and it was because of wars. It was because of, actually, the people from Thailand came in. There's a place called Ayutthaya, and the people that was the head of the area in Bangkok area, that particular people came in to Angkor Wat and destroyed. They took over, and so the people who lived, the Khmer that lived here, went to find new places to live, because that was the end of their home, or however you want to say it. It's,
yeah.
And there were like 3,000 temples. This is not, we're looking at a huge amount of temples, over 70 or 80 square miles. So there are so many, there are a lot of them that are not even excavated, because they're so overgrown with jungle, or so deteriorated that they're not even going to try to work on them. Many buildings were like this one. And if you look down, it's kind of hard to see, but there's an opening at the end here. And it's a doorway going out. I could stand in the middle of some of these structures and look in all the cardinal directions, north, east, south, west. And each doorway was pointed in the cardinal direction, and you could walk, you could see, if you changed your direction, you could see every which way. It was just magnificent. It looked like this. everything carved, everything just beautiful. These up here, I did walk into some places, that was the ceiling. Some of them had caved in and you could not walk through the building any longer because the roof had caved in. This is just one of the temples. There were just so many of them. You could walk any place and every place that looked like it was safe. There would be stairways going up here. You could walk here. You can walk through the doors. They're just fantastic. A lot of this is just stone that's been laying there for a long, long period of time. You can see by the moss on it. This was just an interesting entryway into one of the temples. This was not the temple, it was the entryway. This again was one of the places that I liked because the color was still showing, which was quite interesting. It just, I would love to be able to go back in time and see what these structures looked like when they were relatively new. They must have been really fantastic. All of this work on here, everywhere you look, it's just carving after carving after carving. This was after we left one of the particular temples. I went to maybe 5 or 6 temples, maybe a little more than that in 2 days. I had my watch on, and it was just my pedometer, my Fitbit. I had over 9 miles logged in one day. And a lot of that was up and down because it was not always easy. You walked up stairways, you did things. This was going out in the country. And the reason why I was looking for a picture like this particular one was because this was where people lived. They're just sitting out there, their homes are in the back, and they quite likely had a fire going, a pot of some sort, because they would, some of them just sold food. They sold, they made big, huge pots of something, and you could, like this. They were everywhere, these pots. And down here, you can see the fire, the wood that's in the bottom. But that's part of the reason why the air was polluted when you would get outside of the city limits. It was just that there was a lot of smoke going on. If it was a cool night, they likely would have used some sort of wood to heat their house. But it was fantastic seeing it. This is another one. And this one, I just have one slide from this. Here again are the Naga. They were, from what I read, they could be beneficial or they could be to scare people off from coming, much like maybe the gargoyles when you go to Europe and you see them on the building. They could be something like a gargoyle. They really didn't always understand what the function of those particular statues were. But you can see again, some ceremony, something went on in here, and there was water all around this. So whoever was going out there, quite likely a priest or someone like that, would go out to do the ceremony. And the reason why it makes me think that it might have been a temple of some sort for ceremony was because of these Naga. Sometimes you see them and sometimes you don't. These were just fantastic. These heads here, you'll see one that looks kind of new. Well, some museum has a head. And that's what it was. And so most of these were taken off. And now these quite likely were not good enough to take. But some of them that were in fairly decent shape, they quite likely took those heads off, and they are in museums. So when you go to a museum and you see some information on Angkor Wat, you see a head, quite likely belongs right there. But up here is quite likely a Buddha head going in. And this was a Siem Reap, there was a waterway through here. There were people out on boats and there were just different things going on. This was on both sides. These, on the other side, you can see right here, there's another row. Both sides of the walkway had that. This particular temple was built that way because another temple had been taken over by some Thai people or Vietnamese or whoever came. And so this one was going to be secure. And so they had this all, that was the only way in here. And they had this all figured out. The water was there, everything, it was going to be secure. And then there was another temple within, but there was a wall all around this. One thing I didn't mention and I found very interesting was I would come to a place like this and Lucky would tell me, he'd say, now you are at the south entrance. You keep going until you see south entrance again. Because I told you those long walkways, if you get to the end of it, you go out the north end, east end, west end, and he's waiting at the south end. And so he would tell me, I don't know how many times we would go someplace, he said, south end, you have to be sure. Look, don't, you know, you see north end, go back, keep going, go the other direction. So he was really good about that. Some of these statues are just cleaned up. Some of them are left. And there was where all my walking was going, up and down and traipsing up steps. And it was worth every step. Elephants were huge there. They were huge all over Southeast Asia, places like that. This almost looks like it could be an original elephant that someone just couldn't get down. When you look at these blocks, the work that these people did to build these temples, extraordinary, just extraordinary. This was just an outer wall around a temple. Totally, and this was huge and it was massive. It was top to bottom, all carved. This was the Banyan Temple, and I only included this so that you could have some idea. They suggested ways of visits, but when you went in this direction, you could get lost in this maze. And so Lucky would say, this is it, this is yours. You come this way. This is the Banyan Temple. Buddha's everywhere. That's why I suspect that this was a later one, because being Hindu temples, and most of them were Hindus, Banyan Temple was most likely a later one. There are Buddha heads on each side, all four directions, northeast, southwest. And they were just everywhere. 54 towers with faces sculpted in stone. The faces, this was again for a king, because his alter ego was this particular bodhisattva. And so he wanted people to see him as this royal king character, whatever you want to call it. This young man, I've got one of his pictures. And the one that I chose to purchase from him was a little village scene rather than a Buddha or a monk. Or the people there just touched my heart. They really did. He was so happy to sell a picture, and I never negotiated price. I think he charged me $10 US. For them, that's a lot of money. But he just had the sweetest smile on his face, and I wasn't going to try to do him down. Excuse my terminology, that's old school. I wasn't going to try to diminish anything or give him less money than he had asked. That did happen in a few places where people would start with one price and then they go down, and I still didn't want to buy things. So then all of a sudden, instead of it being $5, they said, how about 3 for $5? And I still didn't want to take it because I only had so much space in my luggage. Now this is the one, Top Rome Temple, and they've left this way because it is a movie set. I mean, it's not always a movie set, but when they need an Indiana Jones, Tomb Raiders, they said Angelina Jolie, I think, was part of one of the films there. This is how they grow. Yeah. And that tree was quite likely about 200 feet tall. Just massive. And to cut it out of there, I don't know that the structure could survive regardless. I just don't think so. This is the guy in the that same place, but in a doorway. Either they were small people or it was an entrance for kids, I'm not sure. What I did notice about this particular place is that they must have been trying to reconstruct it a little, because those stones are not like most of the temples. So they might have done that to shore it up and bring it back to some structural integrity. And this is the last one from the temples slides. And this is another one of those crazy trees growing out. And as you can see all around here, all of this is just being covered by those. And I think they were some sort of fig tree. Not necessarily growing figs, but they were called that. I just noticed this here, that looks like Nagas again. So that might have been, that structure quite likely was used or that part of the structure as a temple. But that's all I've got on Angkor Wat.
Whoa, fantastic. Very interesting.
Did almost all the temples have a double wall feature where there was an inside courtyard and then an inner sanctum situation, or was just that true of Angkor Wat?
Do you know, that's an interesting question, because I think it depended on the size, but I did notice, I walked through many doorways. Usually when I went through, it wasn't like just one. And I think they might have kept the water in some of those places. But even in the women's temple, that particular one, I think only had an outer wall, but in that one, we could walk around all the way around it, and there were walkways. So I think like in that smaller temple, that one quite likely just had one wall. Many of these temples did have two walls around them.
Thank you.
And I don't know if it was for to have more people come in or more space. They said, I've got some information. Yeah, it says here, the temples, some of them are covered with strangler fig trees. They grow up to 40 meters tall. So that's 3 times that. Yeah, 120, so I exaggerated with 200, but around that. I had some other information that I really wanted to. I'm not sure where I have it now.
Thank you.
But you know, I mean, this is just an incredible site, and if you ever get a chance to go there, it is so worth your time. The only regret I had was I had a 3-day pass, and I was going to be there 3 full days. The 3rd day, I just petered out. Because they were long days, and there were some other things I think that looking back at it, I might have gone to, but it was an experience of a lifetime doing this. It just was. So if you get a chance to go there, don't be afraid of, safety is not an issue, just like was mentioned before when you're traveling in Cuba, places like that, there's no safety issue whatsoever. I never felt threatened in any way. And if you don't have any questions on that one, I will go down to my other presentation.
Okay.
Modern day. And I decided to do that one because I think it's really good to find out what's happening in a country now. Let me see if I can do the screen to bring it down a little. The different, and I'm not sure why that is, that the different slideshows need different screens. I'll learn that sometime in the future. I put this information in here because I think it's important to understand a little bit about the people. Siem Reap itself has a population of 150,000 people. That's massive. This is where I came in. The airport's a little on the outskirts of town. The airport was modern, beautiful airport. That's because on any given year, they can have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who come to Siem Reap to see this. And you'll see that later on, tourism, 5-star hotels, everything. Michelin star restaurants if you want to eat at them. It's just really, really developed now that people come to see these rooms. This is what I found really interesting. Average annual family income per capita at the end of 2017, and those are the most recent statistics I could find. $1,400 per person per month. That's what they're earning. Average monthly income was around $200. When I left, I wanted to tip the people at the Airbnb where I was staying, and I looked at Antoine was the guest host. He had an Airbnb, and I wanted to tip. There were two people working, and then Lucky, my driver, to give him a tip. And I offered them. I said, I want $20 each. I want to give them $20 each, and I needed to put it on my credit card because I didn't have a lot of cash on me at that point. The American dollar is primo here. You ever go to Cambodia, take a lot of $1 bills with you, and they don't use the Cambodian real. Everything was done in US dollars. I wanted to give them $20. Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment on so many of these small countries, they've done a lousy job of maintaining the value of their currency. And what they do is they rebuild back to the American dollar. And because what they do is they just print more and it's not worth anything. And so they convert to the American dollar. That's just the way it is.
Yep, you're absolutely right. When you look at it, it's 4,100 Cambodian real is $1 US.
Yeah.
4,100. So, you'd have to carry around 100,000 Cambodian real. And so even in the restaurants, the menu is written in English and in Khmer, and the expense of the meal is in dollars.
Yeah.
Education, that was one of the other things. Education is available and free up to 9 years, but they have a shortage of good teachers. This is what interested me when I started looking at this, because I was doing a little more research. Classes are held from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. So one of the temples I was at, there were little kids selling trinkets, the $3 for $5 kids. I should have just handed them money going back now, but I did not understand before I left there that I needed more US dollars, and I didn't have a way to get them. So that really restricted how much money I could give as not charity. I hate to say that. I asked the kids if they went to school. They spoke good English. And they said, yes, they go to school, but they only go in the morning. And when I saw this note, 7 a.m. to 11 a.m., I understood. In the afternoon, they were out trying to earn money. And these kids were by a temple selling things however they could earn money. Healthcare, in theory, is free, but in fact, many services have charges and supplies may have to be purchased on the open market. And these people have such limited income that they don't always have access to amoxicillin, something like that, should they get sick. This was the other bit of information that we even know about. Pol Pot, the Khmer Rouge, really did decimate the country. They got rid of their teachers, their doctors, that whole age group that are my age group, they're almost non-existent because they killed most of them. So the population is quite young, but there are unexploded ordnances, and they warned us, you don't walk away out in the countryside because it's dangerous. It still is. There are still bombs going off and people are still losing their limbs there. And I don't know how they could clean them all up. This was just another view, and this was really the airport's just a little away from the city, but not very far. So I think the city itself is very dense. I'm not sure of the area that it covers, but this was just coming in. I love taking pictures from the air. I just like to.
Is that road that went down? Is that a road or a canal?
That I think is a road.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know, that's an interesting question. But I think it may be because there were dirt sides and sand sides on many of the roads. So but that is interesting. I don't know. I'd have to go back there. You see water over here too. So it could have been tied into the river. Say that again?
It looks almost like a dirt road with a canal in the middle.
Yeah, that could have been. That really could have been. That could have been. A lot of the traffic is on tuk-tuks or motorbikes, so they don't need very wide roads. When you get out into the countryside, it's more, it's much more rural. The only difference is that the roads going into the temples are blacktopped, maybe poorly, but they're blacktopped because they know they've got buses going on and tuk-tuks. And the tuk-tuk I was in on the one road when we were going out to the women's temple, Montessori, it was like 20 miles out, and I thought, oh my God, am I going to survive this in a tuk-tuk? That's maybe the one I would have hired a taxi for. But I didn't know that going there. So I just did it. Buses went past us. There were bus loads of people. I'm almost guessing that going on a bus would have been less expensive because the cost is split between so many people. Whereas when I had a tuk-tuk driver, it was just me. Even with two people, it was most likely the same price for one person or two. This was my welcome to Siem Reap. It was a tuk-tuk driver going down the street. And that just helped cement in my mind that maybe I made the right decision by deciding to go because I was taking a chance. I was doing this on my own. I actually had planned a trip to Southeast Asia for 5 weeks. This was only 4 nights in Siem Reap. The rest, almost 4 weeks, was in Thailand. And at the end, I went to Malaysia and visited some friends. So it was quite an interesting adventure. This is where I stayed. I could have stayed in one of the fancy new hotels. This was a beautiful property. It was an Airbnb. Antoine was a host. He was from France. All the people there spoke French except me, but some of them had passable English, and so I could communicate with them a little. That was an infinity pool. At the end of the day, they were still out eating, and I was in that pool. It felt so good. It was just a wonderful way to relax at the end of the day. When I came to this Airbnb or bed and breakfast, whatever it would be designated as, this street was dirt in front. So when they first dropped me off, I came in on a dirt street. So while I was there, this young guy's smile says it all. I mean, these people were just incredible people. He's a little guy pushing that huge bucket of cement. It was done manually. There were no tractors, nothing else going on. But they had just started pouring the street. And in the background, you can see the locals' houses. Where I was staying was on this side of the street, the other side, in this 4 bedrooms that we had our own bed and bath. And I had a little lanai, I'm calling it the wrong word, but a little porch that I could walk out into, and I had an overview of the pool. I lived really well. So, I realized when I saw these people and how hard they worked, and they're talking about that income, I thought, I'm lucky. This is the guys working on the street, hauling those big bags of cement, making the cement and doing it. This was just a street we were driving down. I don't know. It's the back streets that I like to look at. The really touristy areas are the ones that are nice. Streets are nice. Everything is wonderful. But going in the back streets is really cool. So I was lucky I was lucky took me on some of them. This was going on all over. They're upgrading, updating places, and a lot of people going to work. This was a new shop that they were just doing. You can see this, the shoes are on the outside as they have in most of their houses. We didn't wear shoes inside, but the modern lighting. So they are really starting to come into a new age. But right outside of the street, outside of that new building, this was the street right down from that new structure that they were building. This quite likely will be gone in a few years. They're upgrading, updating things. And I was walking down the street where I saw this new shop. So you can almost see the future coming. It's good for the locals. They get jobs, updating and upgrading. And it would be better for tourists because that's where I did have to watch my step, not in the temples, but here. This was just a street we were driving around. This is lucky. He had, I actually saw him 3-4 times over the period of time I was there. He picked me up at the airport, took me back. He always had the same type of shirt on, just a little different color in the stripe. But I think he was just a really poor young guy, really a nice guy. Up here's Khmer. You know that you're getting into the Khmer, and they're Khmer people. That's their homeland. You get off the road, there's the local street. And to see a car there was pretty, this was one of my favorite pictures, and I must have had my camera in such a way that that's the extent of my picture. I was in the tuk-tuk. I saw these 2 little boys going down the street. I grabbed my camera, my phone so quickly. I just thought they're 2 young boys, just, they could be anywhere. And I don't know, it just maybe reminded me of my boys. I have no idea, but I looked at them and it just really touched my heart, you know, how these kids live. And this is how some women earn their living. This was not too far from where I was staying. I could walk easily into the main area. Again, up here, you look, there are the Nagas. But that's how I saw quite a few women in different places. It was usually women. That's how they earn their living. And while they were sweeping this part of the street, the traffic went around them. When they were gone, the traffic got crazy again. Here again is a lady wearing a mask, which I noticed when I was looking at it. These are the little mom and pop shops that are everywhere you go. When you go down the roads, you find them. That's how they make their living. People walk in, they need something, they buy it. This one I loved just because I was in the tuk-tuk again. In front of me was this, it was a little, some sort of little truck type thing. This young lady sitting in the back in her colorful clothes. They're moving brooms that were quite likely going to be used for streets, and she's on her device. So you know that, you know, it was like the old world and the whatever it was, but I liked it.
Just like our young people.
Exactly. This was bridges. There were bridges going across the Siem Reap, walking bridges. You can see them all the way down. They had them everywhere, so people could walk from one side of the river to the other. There will be pictures of the night market, and this was the night market. But people would be sitting, just periodically sitting. I never saw an overweight person, ever.
Yeah.
I felt overweight when I saw them, never saw one. This was a day scene very close to one of those walking bridges, but I liked it because you could see the tables and chairs. This is all over Southeast Asia. The plastic chairs, the little tables. And at night, this place is full. These are vendors selling food. They're not too busy during the day, but at night, people just come out. This was on my walkway. I just like this because this was old, and the walkway was over here, the bridge across the Siem Reap River, and this old carriage with selling their baskets or their fishing or whatever that represented. It was just really cool. This was my walk after I was at a restaurant at night. I just liked it. The city lights came on. You can see the Siem Reap River here. It was beautiful. And that's the bridges. They had them lit. It was actually a kind of a touristy area. The big hotel I've had in a few pictures. So there were a lot of tourists. Over in the corner here were all those food wagons, and the tables. On this side was the night market. And there was the night market. This was maybe 2 or 3 blocks long, city blocks, and about a block deep. They sold everything in there, from jewelry to handbags to clothes to souvenirs. It was
Did you get
almost
dollars
anything
out of
you
that?
wanted to.
Did you get dollars out
Pardon
of that
me?
ATM?
No, and I didn't try, because I was getting too close to the end of my journey, and I was not sure if they were going to give me dollars or if they would give me Cambodian money.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
I just was not sure. If I would have had more time, I would have tried to find a bank, because that's the safest way to do it. This is the night market when you're walking down the street. As you can see, tour bus.
Yeah.
So that led me to believe that this was a very touristy night market. There were night markets in different places. There were disco places, there were restaurants, and not too far from here. This is that same park now with the red tables. And that's why I had them out in the beginning, because this is when the sun goes down, the people come out. There were families in here. There were just a lot of people talking. I would love to have eaten here, but there were a few things. One, I wasn't sure what to order, because I kind of was thinking that it's more Khmer than it's English. And so I found a restaurant that had both. This one I really liked. And I had no time to adjust for the light up in the corner here. There's no seatbelt. There's just no seatbelt on this baby. And this woman is just a young mom picking up her dinner, whatever she's doing. And the little one was just perfectly perched up there. Finally, the bike was still and she could move. But it was just a cute picture.
What were the other foreigners around? Other foreigners, were they European or Japanese? I'm just curious.
There were a lot of different, you're right. It was very mixed out at the temples. I did not see them. That's an interesting question, because I did not see them where I was walking. Very few. They might have been like in that night market. I could see them in the night market, but the streets I was walking on, the place I went for dinner, I didn't see them. And the fact that I went for dinner a little earlier, because I was only eating maybe 2 meals a day and pretty exhausted. I wanted to get into the swimming pool. So I ate earlier than many of the countries eat late. But that you can see from here.
We should probably wrap it up.
I'm really close.
Okay.
These are just walking down the street. This is Creative Cocktails. I am really close. I'll go through these fast. This was a modern day temple.
Oh, wow.
But it was from a long time. Here's the Naga. This was just an incredible. Young man, there are the Naga again. This was going down the street. This is modern day Siem Reap, 5-star hotel. And next to a 5-star hotel, malls, condos. Going down the street. This is Cambodia's People Party. This is the Democratic Party. This picture is quite interesting. These are statues. This is a young man. There was a sandwich left here. He was picking up his lunch. Museum that I went to see was wonderful. This was my meal. This, and a drink for $7, $7 US. Let me see what this is. This was another local. I just really like the pictures of the locals. That was it. This was a street completed at the end of my journey. I was leaving the next day. As you can see, that's their new patio. That is their new patio. The people brought their chairs and tables and sat out in their new patio because the street just gave them a place to be. I wish I could have walked up to them and talked. I was on a little side street here. And this was on the way to the airport, my last view. And that was my trip in Cambodia.
Wow.
That was it. It was
Well,
quite an experience.
Thank you very much.
Are there any questions? Does anyone have any questions? I tried to make it, that's why I did the slideshow the way I did, so that I could explain what you were seeing. But if you have any.
Well, it's quite a trip.
Where did you fly through to get there?
I actually came in from Chiang Mai, Thailand. That was my most expensive trip by far. It was almost $250 US dollars to get from Chiang Mai. But when I left Siem Reap, it was $49. So if you came from Bangkok, your ticket quite likely would have been $45, something like that. Because I was coming in from Chiang Mai, it was more expensive. I wasn't going to go to another airport during the time I was gone. For the 5 weeks I was gone, I can't remember. Once I figured out it was like 12 airports, maybe more, because there are stops in between. It was a lot of airports, a lot of,
yeah.
It was so worth it. And the entire trip was not that expensive. Considering if I would have gone with a tour company, it would have been much more. I wanted to go alone. And so I could determine, it's like doing the slideshow, I can determine how fast to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I did
That's
put a lot
amazing.
into this hour. Well, and I put a lot into it, so I kind of apologize for that. But when I had you, I just thought I wanted to give you a pretty good idea
It's
of
wonderful.
what this was about.
It was wonderful.
It's great.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much.
Oh,
So
you're
you
welcome.
have-
I wish I could have.
You have
Oh.
traveled by yourself before to foreign countries.
No, actually, this is the first time. And I was,
Wow.
that was this year. I'm 73 years old. The entire time I was in Southeast Asia, never, ever worried about anything. I just didn't. The streets I walked to my Airbnb did not have lights for the most part. So I was walking in the dark and the only light I had was from my cell phone.
Oh, okay.
And I still did not feel at all threatened.
Nice.
And somebody had told me about this. Someone had told me about the Airbnb, or maybe I would have looked for a different hotel. But this woman from Las Cruces told me she had just stayed there a few months before. She was traveling with another woman. And she said, you really like Antoine, you'll like the breakfast, you will like the space. And she was absolutely right. And I wouldn't have changed it. My experience would have been very different if I would have gone to Hotel Row.
Oh, yeah.
Just would have
Oh
been.
yeah. What are the rates like in the hostels,
The rates?
the Airbnbs?
Well, the Airbnb for breakfast and for a room, a really nice room, I think it was about $50 a night.
Okay.
Whoa.
So it was, and
Very
it was a
reasonable.
beautiful place. It's very,
Yeah.
that's why I said it's not a super expensive place to travel. The places where you would have more expense, like me leaving Chiang Mai and going to Siem Reap. I didn't really think about the cost until I started looking for an air flight and realized, uh-oh. And then I thought, when am I going back?
Exactly.
And so $250 is $250, and it was $250 well spent.
Mm-hmm.
So
But
did
I
you-
just want to mention,
Awesome.
I've traveled in many foreign countries, and I just want to talk about safety. I've been in 100 countries in my career with the World Bank and federal and all that sort of thing. I can tell you, and you just got to be careful sometimes. Generally, people around the world are very safe. They're very kind. All they want to do is have a good life for their children.
Yes.
And in general, if you just pay attention to the yeses and nos, it's safe around the world. It is. If you just pay attention.
Yeah, I can
There are two
definitely
things
agree, for sure.
Well, one thing I found is that a smile goes a long way.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
if you
yes.
learn to say thank you in the language, people just go, it's just little things like that. But the other thing about foreign travel that I'm always very cautious of, because we did have, my husband had his wallet stolen once in Mexico, in Merida, Mexico. And we realized after that, we became much, much more cognizant of keeping our papers safe.
Oh, yes.
And I usually have pockets on the side and don't carry a wallet. I have pockets in my pants or something where I can keep loose cash so that I can just take it out of my wallet or do something. But we've become very, very aware. If there's anything that's going to happen, it'll quite likely just be theft.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
That
very
Oh, you're
Yes.
welcome.
That was awesome.
Oh, thanks for
That was
thank
awesome.
you.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so very much for forcing me to learn. This goes back to
You're a
this
good-
goes back to ALR. because
You'll
that's
probably
what it's about.
put a business card out there now.
Well, you let me know when you want to go to Cuba. So,
I would love
Okay.
to.
yes.
I'll be in touch with
Okay.
you, Elena. Maybe you could give us a talk about Cuba.
Sure.
Yes, and please,
Sure.
I want to be on that one.
Yeah.
I do. Great. And when the
Okay.
new church gets back together, I'm hoping, we used to go there years ago, and then we started traveling and doing things. And Ann Knowles, and I'm thinking of a few other people, but Ann Knowles has passed away. She was a friend of mine. And so I just remember, yeah, it was a good place. I took Tai Chi or something like that from her long time ago. Hope to see you all again.
Okay,
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. That was
All right.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Bye-bye.
Oh, by the way, next week, we have, here, Carlos Avila, 6th grade social studies teacher. He's going to talk about the challenge of teaching online.
All right.
And I think it'll be
You know,
great.
I'm for it. Keep me
Yeah.
on your list, Paul. Please
Okay,
keep
I
me on
will.
your list.
All right.
Awesome.
Got it.
Is it Carlos
Thank you.
Avila?
Carlos Avila.
Avila?
Yeah, Avila. Yeah,
Avila.
yeah, Avila.
Avila.
Yeah.
Awesome. Good. Good deal.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
See ya. Thank you.
Sounds
Bye-bye.
great, everyone. See you next
Thank you,
time.
Sarah. Thank
Cool.
you.